As you heard my journey earlier, I was a former fat kid too. And I had my own body dysmorphia issues. I didn't like the way I looked. I was bullied by the way I looked. I was made fun of. I mean, heck, I told you earlier, I had man boobs. What kind of guy wants to be walking around with man boobs and being made fun of by that? So, and the only two options I was given was testosterone replacement therapy or plastic surgery, right? And you, as you mentioned earlier, like females are only given one option. It's diet, but they change the diet every other day. And all the information we get every other day, as you mentioned earlier, some of these, I don't want to call, I'm going to call them nuts because that's what they are. Some of these nuts out here are telling you not to eat fruits and vegetables. It's like, what? Study after study has showed you eating more fruits and vegetables will be helpful. Everything in moderation. And a key takeaway here is the 80-20 rule. So we hear about this all the time, but are you doing 80% of the week you want it to be and then 20% being free? So what do I mean by that? When I talk about someone who's training for something, when you get closer to that competition day, or if we're just trying to get ready for the summer, then you have to be 95-5, meaning you have to be 95 in tune with your diet and 5% liberal. If you're trying to be just coasting, you're happy where you're at and be sustainable, how do we make it fit that 80-20 rule? And if we look at a day or actually a week of breakfast, lunches, and dinners, that's 21 meals. So out of those 21 meals, can you hit 17 of them with the way you want?
This is the Play Your Position podcast, where we huddle up, call the plays, and inspire you to run your ball into the end zone. Are you ready to score more game-winning touchdowns in your life, business, and career? Then listen up, because it's game time, baby. Now, here's your host, Mary Lou Kaiser.
All right, Team PYP. Welcome to another episode of the Play Your Position podcast. I hope you are ready for some high energy and the heat, because my guest today is bringing both. His name is Tony Castillo. He's coming to us from the state of Florida, and he's going to take us into his journey in a minute. But Tony, are you ready for kickoff?
Oh, I'm so ready. Let's go.
Yeah. Woo! As you can hear, team, this is going to be a great ride today. So here's some things I know about Tony. He is an elite nutrition expert specializing in sports nutrition and aiding athletes, business leaders, and anyone seeking to boost their performance through nutrition. Tony's background in dietetics led him to work with Major League Baseball teams such as the Toronto Blue Jays and the University of Florida. Tony's journey started in middle school as an overweight student and continued into high school until he jumped onto a, air quote, diet, resulting in unsustainable weight loss. Today, Tony is on a mission to teach others about the significance of healthy lifestyle modifications that can optimize performance in every area of life. So, Tony, you have got quite a story and a journey that I think is going to resonate with a lot of listeners. So let's get some context going. Tell us your story about when you got the call to leadership. Was it when you were in middle school? Was it another point in your life? But bring us into your world as a leader in the space of performance nutrition.
Mary Lou, number one, thank you so much for having me on. And I know you're a Ducks fan, so
Yes.
You won't hold it against me that I'm an SEC, former SEC dietitian. So my call to leadership, there are so many points in my life, but I would say two major points that I can think about. One was I had a sister with Down syndrome. And when my parents got divorced when I was younger, I was between 8 and 10 years old when they separated and got divorced and all that. I knew I had to step up and manage the house. For lack of better words, being the man of the house, just helping out around, because my sister, she couldn't even speak. So it was really just trying to take that leadership role in the house. And then at 13 years old, I went to a urologist with my mother, and the urologist was a female, and we'll get to the point of that, why that's important. So at 13 years old, they tell me, the urologist says, "Hey, Tony, drop your pants." And at 13 years old, Mary Lou, that was a very scary experience, being in front of my mother and then a female urologist. Of course, it's like, what is this? And they looked at, I'm just be open and honest here, Mary Lou, they looked at my testicles, something we look at in locker rooms all the time in football games, all right? Even as a sports dietitian. So why is that important? They compared it to what something would look like a different sizes of Mardi Gras beads. And I want to clarify, not the small beads, all different sizes, because someone once asked me, like, the really small ones? I was like, no, all different sizes. Well, Mary Lou, everything came back normal. I had gynecomastia, which is AKA man boobs, which we may see in some elite athletes that may be sumo wrestlers or even offensive linemen. Well, I was 250 pounds at 13 years old, and the options I got was either to do testosterone replacement therapy or plastic surgery. And I knew I didn't want to do either of those two options at 13 years old. So I had to be a leader in my health to say, no, I don't want to do this. And of course, my mother supported my decision, but I thought that was ridiculous at 13 years old. So that was like one of my really true health and performance leaderships in myself and being an advocate for myself in health. And then from there, I actually moved on and I kept the weight on. I was actually an offensive lineman in football. And from there, I got a meal plan from that diet that you had mentioned earlier from a friend of mine who was a bodybuilder. He gave me the meal plan and I lost all the weight. But Mary Lou, in college, I decided to do the exact opposite of that. Pizza, beer, tacos, all tasted way better than counting any Triscuits, goldfish, cheese sticks, any of those things. So I went through a bunch of yo-yo dieting. I tried every supplement out there. There was even a ballerina skinny tea that my girlfriend, who's now my wife at the time, was taking. Fun fact, it was just a laxative. Anyways, I didn't lose any weight. I was just doing sprints to the bathroom. And eventually I broke my foot dancing on a Halloween night because I was underfueling, meaning I wasn't giving my body enough nutrients. And I broke my foot. And we see that so much in the athletic realm. And we see that as well in so many entrepreneurs that they're just running on fumes instead of fueling their bodies for performance. Well, anyways, I went to go, as you mentioned, work with the Toronto Blue Jays. And I also worked at the University of Florida with those athletes. And Mary Lou, the reason was I wanted to see, how are they fueling the way they fuel? Are they doing steroids? Are they doing some sort of supplement that I'm unaware of? And that's what called my leadership in health and performance in that performance realm. And then as well, we see some of these stars go out and talk about eating such foods such as dairies, Wheaties we always hear about. How is it they can eat these foods that we're told to stay away from and look the way they do and perform the way they do? So that's when I was called to leadership position because I saw they had a great relationship with food. And then working with these pro teams and with these Olympic athletes and all these kind of sports, I saw that if they took a leadership role in their sports, they could learn from the expert in health and nutrition, in strength and conditioning, in mental performance. They knew to reach out to a leader. So I knew that's when I had to be a leader in my field and not just do what was told, but go in the nitty gritty, know what's going on in the world of nutrition and be up to date because they wanted what was best, not what was known.
Interesting distinction, what's best versus what's known. So there's a lot to unpack in that story. Obviously, as a young man, the trauma of that experience in the doctor's office. And I don't care who you are. Middle school is the worst. That from about age 10 to 14 or 15, we are just all struggling along, and it's everybody's changing at different rates, and nobody likes themselves, and everybody's mean. And it's so painful. I don't know how kids today, my heart breaks because of the impact of social media on young people and the body dysmorphia that is, at alarming rates. I'm sure you're aware of all those stats. And so here you are in a space where your mission is to promote peak performance through nutrition. And I know listeners are curious because I am. What is best right now? What is best for, and I realize there's not a one size fits all approach. I get that, but just in a 30,000 foot view, what should we be paying attention to, Tony, when it comes to fueling our bodies?
I want this to be the sound bite on this episode, which is nutrition isn't a Hail Mary. It's all about first downs. And I think so many of us try to go for those Hail Marys, which is getting on the next best thing versus what does the research say? What is actually happening, right? We're just trying to throw that last pass, that last minute pass, but we're throwing Hail Marys in the first quarter. That's not going to work. Football, if a team only threw Hail Marys, how well would they do, Mary Lou?
Yeah, they wouldn't.
They wouldn't. And yet when it comes to diet and nutrition, that's all we do. We don't listen to the coach. We just throw Hail Marys. We decide to hear the other team's plays and say, we're going to throw a Hail Mary because we know what their defense is doing, and we get intercepted. So what do I mean by that? We try things such as fasting. We try things such as keto. We try things such as these green powders or green supplements. We try things that, quote unquote, help our gut health. We try things that we've heard can help with cognition, but we don't know what actually works for us because instead of listening to the coach, we're listening to everyone else in the stadium. And we keep trying to throw those Hail Marys, which are those fad diets or fad things we hear versus what actually works. And what are the things that work? The foundational things. Even when we're talking about football, we always work on the foundational pieces. When I was working at the University of Florida, I'd listen to the coaches, whether it was a strength and conditioning coach or a head coach or a position coach. They were always talking about foundations, because when we're under those times of high stress, we lean back to our foundations. So what are those foundational things everyone should be doing? One, we should be doing what I like to say, hydrate or dihydrate, meaning we're drinking enough water every day. And a simple tip for everyone listening is just half your body weight in ounces should be your goal if you're not doing any physical activity that day. And then for physical activity, you should actually take your weight for 3 days pre and post any kind of workout you do, whether that's walking, running, strength training, hits, anything of that nature. And for every pound you lose during that workout, you should be actually adding 24 ounces of water for every pound you lose. And then we can even go talking into electrolytes, but really let's just talk about hydration. That's the first piece. The second piece that people should really be focusing on is eating carbs. Our body burns about 140 grams of carbs a day, just in our brains. That doesn't count for any sort of physical activity. That's just you and I having this conversation today, Mary Lou. So what does that look like? 140 grams of carbs? That is about 3 cups of rice a day, if we're just thinking of rice, or 3 cups of potatoes. So if you aren't even hitting that load of carbohydrates, you're doing your body a disservice. And I say that because I used to be scared of carbs. Mary Lou,
God, they've become
right?
the ugly, they've become carbs are like the bad. I was thinking this morning about, do you remember the fitness guru Covert Bailey from the 80s?
Yes.
Okay. Fit or Fat. Remember that
Yes.
book? That was like a Bible for all of us of a certain age. And it's so interesting because fat was the enemy. And I'm sure you're going to go into fats in a minute. Fats are not the enemy, folks. It's, sugar and high fructose corn syrup and things like that. And again, I'm not trying to step on your toes here. I was thinking about Covert Bailey and how his approach at the time was what people believed. And no.
Well,
carbs are good.
Yes, carbs are delicious, tasteful things. And one thing I always see with the people I work with, a lot of these entrepreneurs, is that they try to stay away from their favorite foods. They let culture be an obstacle instead of an asset. So what do I mean? Whether they're Italian, let's say, and they really like pastas or pizzas, they restrict them or they negate them because they feel like that's what's going to give them success. That's like saying you're taking your best plays and not using them because you're worried they're going to be too good and you're going to do it too well, right? So using those carbohydrates, that's our body's fuel source. So our gas for our car. And then going into the fats, that's what I like to call our body's waxing. So we wax our car so it looks nice and runs well. Well, that helps our cholesterol, our hormone levels, such as testosterone and estrogen, which all of us utilize. It helps with actual skin health, gut health, brain health, all these things we actually need from fats. And then finally, I like proteins to be considered the car's or the body's repair system. So think about just getting that oil change in your car. So with everyone, we need those 3 macronutrients, or we need those 3 sources of energy to help us perform at our peak. And even going back to the high fructose corn syrup and actually sugar, when it comes to these high performing athletes and even some of these entrepreneurs, a lot of these people go out and they do a 2-hour workout where they just leave everything on the floor. We actually need some of those sugars to replenish the muscle glycogen we just used, right? And some of the easiest ways for some people, it could be a flat soda, which I've seen a lot of long distance bikers use because that's what they like. They don't like the bubbles. So it just really, how are we utilizing those fuel sources, right? If you're someone who's doing a lot of activity, you may need some of those fast acting carbs to replenish our glycogen or energy stores in our muscles. But if you're someone who's not doing a lot of physical activity, you're sitting at a desk all day, that's when we need to reevaluate those fuel sources and what you're using to get you to perform at the peak. So having those foundational things, Mary Lou, are the most important things, because when we go into the fourth quarter, the 2-minute drills in football, you have to have that foundation down, because if not, you're just going to do whatever seems willy-nilly at the time, and Hail Marys don't work all the time. So we want to make sure you just keep getting that first down, get to the end. How do we get to the sidelines to stop the clock? How do we get you to move the downs forward? And that's what you're going to do in that 2-minute drill. And if you can do it in the 2-minute drill, you can do it for the rest of your life.
Wow. I love it. It's so, again, fundamental stuff we learned in health class about the balance between carbs and fats and proteins. And there's you nailed it earlier about the we are bombarded constantly with the latest and greatest, air quote around those,
Yes.
Magic potion that's going to transform us from whatever we are to whatever we're seeing on the image. And, body, what's in terms of trendy changes from year to year, it seems. And also certainly social media has opened up an entire, I guess, realm of we're not going to body shame anymore. And people who don't fit what used to be a very, very narrow cultural definition of what beauty and health, and fitness looks like. It's so fascinating to me to see how the pendulum is always swinging around. But at the base of all this is, what are you putting in your pie hole every day?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's like, how are you feeling? So when you work with people, Tony, you obviously explain the foundations, but what about where should we be getting the fats, carbs, and proteins with the insane amount of food? And again, loosely used word here, choices available today.
Yes. I always like to say the more whole foods, the better, right?
Yeah.
The time we talk about processed foods, if at all, should be if you're someone who's very, very physically active. Are you doing 2-a-days? Are you training for a marathon? Are you training for an ultra marathon? Because sometimes the gut or your stomach can't handle the amount of actual whole food you'd have to eat to hit those calorie goals, right? But if we're just sitting at a desk working on our computer, working on our business, that's not really the time we need to be fueling with that sort of high energy fuel. So the one thing I like to talk about is something called the carb to fiber ratio, Mary Lou. And what that is, if you take any carbohydrate out there, so it could be, let's say, cereals, rices, pastas, breads, that energy source, you want it to be a 5-to-1 or less. So a prime example, there is a bread out there that has per slice about 15 grams of carbohydrates, and it has about 3 grams of fiber. So you divide the 15 grams of carbohydrates, divide that by fiber, and that gives us a 5-to-1 ratio. Now, there is a cereal out there, which I don't want to name, but it's a pretty well-known health, quote unquote, health cereal. And it actually is a 29 grams of carbohydrates to 1 gram of fiber. So why is that? What is that differentiator? Yes, I'm glad you said that, because that 5-to-1 ratio is what I like to call that premium fuel. That's what's going to give us sustained energy, and it's also going to manage our hunger. So those are going to be the kind of gas we put in that Maserati. We're going to be putting in that Ferrari, which is everyone I work with. That's what I imagine their bodies are like. Now, there's nothing wrong with a Toyota Corolla. I've driven one for many years, but we're going to put regular gas in it, right? We're not going to put that premium gas in it. And I've confirmed this with a mechanic. I was like, what happens if you do put premium gas into Toyota Corolla? Mary Lou, it actually runs better. But anyway, what we want to do, if you do have that Toyota Corolla body, we want to make sure you still put that premium gases. So those carbs you want to have is that 5-to-1 ratio. So 1-to-1, 2-to-1, 3-to-1, 4-to-1, 5-to-1. So those are going to be things such as oatmeals, quinoas, brown rice, whole wheat or whole grain pastas, whole grain breads. Now, things that are going to be 10-to-1 and above, so that's going to be that regular fuel. So those are going to be things that boost your energy up, but then crash it back down. That can lead to that afternoon slump that we really try to avoid. So those are going to be those fast-acting carbs. So a lot of the white breads, candies, anything of that nature, chips that you might be getting with your salad or even your sandwich. Those are the things that are going to make your energy go up and then crash right back down in the afternoon. And we want to stay away from those if it's not around workouts. If it's around workouts, we actually want those fast-acting fuels, 1, to give us energy to push through that workout, and 2, to refuel our muscle store. So those are the carbohydrates. So using that carb to fiber ratio is something you and your listeners can take home that I taught to many NFL athletes, collegiate athletes, pro athletes, a lot of the entrepreneurs I work with now, to use it in their daily life. And that's how they can evaluate any sort of carbohydrate that they're about to eat, especially if they're traveling and they want to grab something from the Hudson news station that they might see. Yeah, because that's all you have available, right? You're just rushing through. Right.
With $15 sandwiches.
So good way is looking at that carb to fiber ratio. And then when it comes to proteins, I always like to say the less legs, the better. Now, I had an entrepreneur client. he is a lawyer, and he's like, well, Tony, it's actually the fewer legs are better. But it doesn't sound as good. The alliteration is much better, Mary Lou,
Yes,
with the
it
less
is.
legs, the better. And when we're working with athletes and entrepreneurs, we want them to have things that they will remember. So the less legs, the better. So that means we're going to want fish over chicken because chicken has 2 legs. We're going to want chicken over beef because beef has 4 legs. Why is that? Because as we go down in legs, we actually have more omega-3. So those are going to be those anti-inflammatory fats that are going to help us recover better for our heart health. It even has been shown to help with vision. It's been shown to help with arthritis. So we want to be getting fish, then chicken, then beef. Of course, we still want to get beef in because it's high in iron and that's what brings oxygen to our body. But if we had just a real quick reminder, so for carbs, carb to fiber ratio, for proteins, the less legs, the better, right? So those are the 2 things we're going to be looking at to fill our plate. We don't want to forget our fruits and vegetables, right? Because they have vitamins and minerals. And Mary Lou, can I share a funny story with you about when I was working with collegiate athletes?
Yes.
All right. So one thing that I know about football players, Mary Lou, is that they love ranch dressing.
Is that right? Interesting.
They absolutely love it. They used to get chicken wings that we would serve or anything that we'd have, and it'd be a bowl of ranch dressing. And I was like, all right, how are we going to work with this? But anyways, just to go into it, there was a buffet we laid out. It was a pregame meal, and they had asparagus out. No one was touching the asparagus, Mary Lou. And I asked one of the players, I was like, hey, why aren't you eating the asparagus? One of the senior players, he's like, Coach, this stuff makes your pee smell. And I was like, you're absolutely right. But it has something in it, an amino acid called asparagine. And they were like, oh, okay. So you're saying it helps with protein and muscle building. I'm like, well, it's an amino acid. It has more vitamins and minerals than helping with protein. And all he said, Rook, every Rook needs to come here and eat all the asparagus you can. And I was like, well, if that's the message we're getting across, more vitamins and minerals, we're getting them ready to see better, feel better, and play better. Let's use that analogy. So that vet made sure all the Rooks on the team ate that asparagus up. So making sure that fruits and vegetables, Mary Lou, is very important for our team. So fruits and vegetables, we spoke about the less legs, the better, the carb to fiber ratio. And then I did mention hydration and how to measure it, but there's another method we can use, Mary Lou, which is looking at our urine. I know it's not a fun topic to talk about, but we want it to look like lemonade. We don't want it to be clear, actually. And we also don't want it to look dark like diet soda or apple juice. So a lot of entrepreneurs I've seen, they mess up because they think clear urine means they're doing well. But
I did too. Why is that? Why is clear not a good?
Clear is not good because that means you're not getting enough electrolytes. So sodium, potassium, magnesium, and chloride, which we typically sweat out. And if we have a whole foods diet, as mentioned earlier, Mary Lou, we're not getting the sodium that's typically put into these processed foods.
Right.
So we're avoiding it. So we're actually having problems using our muscle function. There was actually someone I was working with and they were getting full body cramps. And the reason was because their urine was clear because they weren't getting that sodium, potassium, magnesium, and chloride to keep the water in their body. So a simple fix is by adding salt to your meals or using an electrolyte-rich beverage or electrolyte supplement beverage packet to get those electrolytes in, especially around workouts, because you want it to be like lemonade. Now, if it looks like apple juice, and I've even seen it look like Guinness beer, Mary Lou, because I had a player say, Tony, come look at the toilet. And Mary Lou, I thought to myself, I made it to the pinnacle of my career. You know what I'm saying?
Woo!
Yeah, let's see it, baby.
Okay, show me.
And it looked like Guinness. And I was like, what are you doing?
Oh, gosh.
And he was like, I thought you'd be proud because you always talk about hydrate or dihydrate. And I had said I had never seen dark urine like that. And I was like, well, I'm not happy at all. And this was a baseball player. He actually went out and he told me the day before he decided to go out golfing and him and his teammates decided to have a couple drinks, would turn into a couple beers and a couple shots of whiskey. And I was like, that was a bad idea for you playing today. And if you know any baseball, he went out for the first inning and got pulled out because he gave up 10 runs, which is not a good thing at all. Yes, he had headaches. He had nausea. He couldn't even see the catcher's glove. And this is all because he was dehydrated. And of course, we tried to get him hydrated before the game by giving him water, by giving him electrolyte-rich beverages. However, Mary Lou, it didn't help. At the end of the day, it really affected his performance. And I always say hydrate or start with hydration, Mary Lou, because it's been shown to affect anywhere between 7 to 10% of our performance. And we talk about performance, whether we are an athlete or an entrepreneur. I like to say, focus. we're looking at things. We're trying to be the best we can be. And our bodies are made up of 60% water. So if we're anywhere between 2 to 3% dehydrated, it affects our performance by 7 to 10%. And if you're trying to focus on a project or focus on client work or focusing on just running your business and being a leader, Mary Lou, and you're down by 10%, you're not going to be able to play any sport, let alone be the best leader you can be. So having that urine that is either too clear or too dark, you're losing 10% of your performance. So that means you're at 90% of what you need to be.
It's halftime here at the Play Your Position podcast, and we've got ourselves a great game. While you're up grabbing another snack and topping off your favorite beverage, make sure to subscribe to the show so you never miss another play. PYP is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever great podcasts can be found. Now, let's get back to the game.
It's such a great and simple way of measuring our health. And obviously it's one piece of many, but for all of us listening to what you're saying today, Tony, it's really helpful because I was under I don't know where I picked it up, somewhere along the line, probably a magazine or watching a thought leader. I was under the impression that the goal was to see your urine be on the clear side.
Yep.
I'd also heard about the lemonade, and I knew that dark was not a good idea. And you see that's like alarm bells, that you've got to do something else. But so you mentioned alcohol. Let's talk about that briefly, because there's a lot of misinformation and a lot of different schools of thought around, is a glass of wine here and there, or a shot of whiskey once in a while, or a beer, yay or nay, or is it just dependent? And I'm not talking about people who, obviously perhaps have become dependent, have an addiction issue. I'm just saying for those, you hear about like the Mediterranean diet, or you look at people in France and Italy, and they're drinking wine constantly. It's like, what's going on? And they're all thin. They're eating pasta and croissants and cafe au lait and all that, and chocolate, and drinking like 4 bottles of red wine a day, and they're skinny as rails. Like, what's happening here? And they live to 120.
Yeah. So when it comes to longevity, there's so much that we're starting to learn about our genetics and what that deals with drinking alcohol. If you're someone who drinks alcohol and you enjoy it, I always give make sure you're hydrated and what to set up with it. Because typically when we drink alcohol, we start to make poor decisions. And I'm just only going to say around nutrition, because that's my area of expertise. So I'll stick there. We start to make poor decisions. And here's a few reasons why. One, when we drink alcohol, what it does in our body is it tells our body to stop worrying about a leaky faucet and worry about the fire. So what do I mean by that? For someone who's looking to drop body weight and increase muscle mass, that's like a leaky faucet in our house. But when we drink alcohol, the body perceives that as a poison. Now, Mary Lou, let me say I drink alcohol. I'm not going to sit here and say I don't. But the body sees that as a fire. And if you had a fire in your house or a leaky faucet, which one would you attend to at that moment, Mary Lou?
Fire.
The fire. Right. So we're going to try to get rid of that alcohol as quickly as possible. So we're actually stopping muscle building and fat loss. The other thing we're doing is we're lowering our testosterone production from anywhere between 48 hours to a full week. And yes, men and women both produce testosterone, and it is important for both health, especially looking at women and their longevity. We've seen that having levels of testosterone that are within that optimal range can help with bone density. So having stronger bones in the long term. So drinking alcohol can affect our long-term health. It also utilizes those muscle stores that I was talking about earlier of glycogen. So that's where carbs are stored. It actually reduces it by 50%. So the next day after drinking, you probably don't feel like you're ready to go run a marathon.
No.
No, absolutely not. Not myself.
Definitely not. So, you don't want to do much of anything.
No,
except feel sorry for yourself.
Yes. Well, that even leads into the cortisol levels. We talk about stress. So a lot of what we were told, or what I grew up with, was like, you can have a nightcap. Well, unfortunately, when we drink alcohol, it actually increases our cortisol or stress hormone, which means it's going to deplete or has an inverse relationship with melatonin, which helps us go to sleep naturally. And that's why typically the next day after drinking, you feel tired all day and you want that afternoon nap because your body doesn't actually get into restful sleep. So alcohol affects our testosterone. It affects our sleep. It affects our fat loss. It affects our muscle building. Would I recommend alcohol? It just depends on how it fits into your goals. If there's someone I work with and they enjoy alcohol, let's say they enjoy a glass of red wine, they enjoy whiskey, I try to recommend them only having it 1 to 2 times a week, right? And just having 1 to 2 glasses and leaving those special occasions for those special days. Because if we look at it from a 30,000 foot view, as mentioned earlier, we're not going to be worried about someone who's having, let's say, Memorial Day just passed. So they decided to have a couple margaritas that day, right? It's 1 day out of 365. But if those margaritas turn into beers the next day, and then, well, you know what? Monday already happened. Let's make Tuesday be a couple glasses of wine. The next day, a couple mixed drinks and so on and so forth. Then it becomes a habit. That's when it becomes an issue. But having a couple glasses a few times a week is not something that we need to worry about when we're talking about how to make it fit, right? Of course, if you can avoid or abstain, that's most likely what they've been showing more and more is helping with longevity. But I think it has to do a lot with genetics. What is your genetic background? And 2, what is your relationship with alcohol and how are you utilizing it?
Yeah, that's really well said. And team, I want to just be very clear that we're not advocating to start drinking if you don't, or,
No.
you know, it's part of our culture and the prevalence I've noticed of advertising for particularly things like whiskey, vodka, tequila has increased significantly in the last few years, and they're often advertised during sports programs. Like, you know, I watch baseball games with my mom. I'm obviously, you guys all know, I'm a huge sports fan. So during football season, I've got games on in the background, and what got advertised. It used to just be Budweiser, right, and maybe Michelob Light. Well, now it's the heavy stuff. It's become much more culturally. They make it seem very sexy. And I think it's wise to be, to listen to your body. And also, like you said, Tony, what is your relationship overall with anything like that? And it's the same with food. What is the relationship with food? I heard it said somewhere, and I'm curious what you think of this, that I think it was actually Tony Robbins talks about this. He talks about that people who tend to be emotional eaters, they're not actually tasting the food. They're tasting the memory that they have that they associate with that food. And that when you can work through that, and that's a whole different ball game. But, he himself struggled with emotional eating, and he talks very openly about how he was able to move past that through hard work and probably working with people like you who are skilled and educated, and you have your finger on the pulse of what really does work and what you steer people away from. So when people are people listening and they're thinking, well, none of us is perfect, right? There is no such thing. It's really just being conscious more times than not. And then when going to the grocery store, you mentioned Whole Foods, and so we live in a busy culture. People are on the road a lot. So why don't you talk about, as in a post-pandemic world, as people are traveling more and are away from their usual routines. You mentioned the Hudson, grabbing something out of there. Look at that bag of Bugles. That looks really good, right? I'm going to have that on the plane. With a beer. So
absolutely. And they have the cookies and pretzels. Why not?
Oh gosh! And both, and the mega bag of M&Ms. It's like here's my lunch. But yeah, what are some tips that are there some things that ways of looking at, I'm on the road, I'm traveling, I'm on vacation, this is not my usual, I'm tempted by X, Y, and Z. What do you obviously work with athletes who are constantly traveling, but they have teams, they have I would imagine teams that are producing for them the food that they eat, the fuel that they have. But for regular folks who, don't have a team of dietitians or chefs or whatever, preparing, how do we wrestle with being outside of our usual routine and not being at fully control of, like, if we're in a restaurant or traveling through the airport?
Yeah, Mary Lou, and I love that. I wouldn't say regular folk. I would say leaders, right? The leaders that are listening here.
Yes.
How can they be role models and leaders? And that's some of the things I teach. How are we making these sustainable habits? What are they looking for? If it's just a vacation, what are some things we should be talking about? One, hydration. Can you bring an empty water bottle with you through the airport? Absolutely. You can fill it right when you get past security. I do it all the time.
Yes.
I was even at a conference with some other dietitians, and the one thing that they always said, I got through the airport with them, and we filled our water bottles together, and we said, hydrate or dihydrate. We cheers to it. That's the first piece, Mary Lou.
Yes.
So we cheers to that. So making sure you bring water with you wherever you're traveling to. How can you get water accessible to you? And a lot of the leaders I work with, they might be traveling for 3 weeks out of the month, and they have those higher point statuses at the hotels, at the airlines. So at the hotels, you can ask them to put water in your room, right? So making sure you have that water accessible. And if not, can you just do a quick little search on your phone using the smartphones and find the closest gas station, find the closest pharmacy or grocery store so that you can get that gallon of water to you? And with all this post-pandemic delivery, can you get some things delivered to your room and held for you at the hotel before you get there? So I love to come up with a list of things with the leaders I work with so they can have that ready, and then do a search of what's around you. So if you're going on vacation, you're going to enjoy yourself, I just say, number one, stay hydrated. Number two, what are some things you can pick up? Prioritize protein. Why is that? Because we want to make sure we get that muscle building switch on. So one thing I didn't mention when it comes to protein, you should be eating protein every 3 to 4 hours, because we have this light switch that goes on and off in our body. And when we eat about a palm size of protein every 3 to 4 hours, it turns on that light switch to help build muscle. Now, what some people will say, well, if I just eat like a big porterhouse, that's going to keep that light switch on for the whole day. Unfortunately, that's not true, Mary Lou. I wish it was. Yeah.
Love me a porterhouse.
Yeah, everyone does. So with that, you have to be eating a palm size of protein every 3 to 4 hours. So I tell the leaders I work with, if they're going to travel, can you bring number one, protein bars with you? If you want something a little less processed, can you bring beef jerky with you? Can you grab something at the Hudson News? So they have these shakes that you can grab that are made just from real food. You can grab cheese sticks. You can grab hard-boiled eggs now. You can grab, I'm just trying to think what I saw recently.
What about nuts?
So I
like
love
almonds, things like that, cashews, which is really a legume.
Yes. And those are actually higher in fat. And the same thing with peanut butters. They're not they do have protein, but you would need to eat 8 tablespoons of peanut butter, just to give you an idea, which is a lot of peanut butter. And the way I think of a tablespoon, that's about a thumb. So you'd have to eat 8 thumbs of peanut butter to get just the same amount of protein from a palm of protein, right? So that means that palm of, let's say, a chicken breast, that's about the same amount of quality of protein to turn on that muscle building switch. So of course, I've worked with vegetarians, vegans, and people that are more plant forward, and there's ways to go around it, such as edamame. So you can get dry roasted edamame.
Oh, yummy.
Dry roasted chickpeas. And yes, you can have nuts. I'm not fearful of nuts, but to get the same amount of protein to turn on that muscle building switch, you just need to have a lot of them. So again, it just goes back to what is your weight and weight management goals, and what is your goal during this trip. If you're enjoying vacation and you enjoy nuts, I always like to stick to pistachios, because you got to crack them to eat them. So you can be a little bit more mindful with it. Yes. And again, you can find those things at the airport, wherever you're going. And then if you're traveling, you want to have that glass of wine, making sure you're prioritizing that protein again, and trying to get fruits and vegetables, because you won't see that at the airport when you're traveling. At least I haven't seen any carrots for sale. And if I did, I probably wouldn't be eating them from the airport. But again, having those perks, you can go to some of the lounges that they offer, and they typically have some fruits and vegetables for you to take. You can fill up your water bottle there, or wherever you land. I always like to tell people, start with breakfast. That way you're starting off on the right foot with some sort of protein source and some fruits and vegetables. And then one other meal, make sure half the plate is some sort of vegetable. Those are 2 things I really like to state when people travel. 1, you start off with breakfast, a great way to get things kicked off, get that muscle building switch on. And 2, if you can make one more plate, have some fruits and vegetables, you're almost halfway to your goal of how many fruits and vegetables you need in a day.
Yeah. Yeah. I know at least JFK, some of there's a, it's called Ciro, CIRO. It's one of those places where you can buy, all the things we've been talking about. And they do now sell little packets of baby carrots and celery sticks. And guess what they have in there? A packet of a dipping thing of ranch.
Yeah.
Really
They must know
popular
some
ranch
football
dressing.
players.
Yeah, and I've been known to pick up a couple of those, traveling through. But that great tips there, because again, with the world opening up again and people itchy to take trips, in business, certainly, I know people who continue to travel during the pandemic because they had to, for their work, and I think. Again, the goal is not to be perfect every day because that's impossible and there's no such thing. But you've brought up some really great points, especially related to being a leader of whatever it is, being a leader of your life. I mean, I've been a health nut because I was chubby as a child and I was teased and bullied because of it. And I know the pain and the isolation that being overweight can bring to a person, and being female in a culture that is very, I mean, it's hard on men too. I'm not saying it's our culture is just mean when it comes to trying to control us in our choices and, hold up these specific ideals that are almost impossible for everybody to achieve when it's so narrow. And what I like about your approach, Tony, is it really sounds like, you have your basics in place that can work for across the board. And then when you're working with clients, you take into account their specific situation. And, I think that's a mark of a great leader, because leadership isn't one size fits all either. It's contextual, and there are going to be circumstances that you didn't read about in a textbook. There wasn't a case study about that particular situation. And nutrition is, there's so much confusion there, and the amount of advertising dollars that are put into pushing the magic potion in a bottle, whether it's a pill or it's a supplement, or it's that, like you were saying, the green powders that you can mix into everything. And then plant forward versus no, I'm keto all the way. It's everything under the sun. And I'm just curious if there was one, besides the things you shared. I love hydrate or dihydrate. I love the 5-to-1. I think that's awesome to be aware. Like, look at the label, be aware of the math, and pay attention to the source of your food. Is the fruit and vegetable look like the fruit and vegetable, or is it a Skittle? It's a yellow Skittle. This is a lemon, right?
It's like Fruit Loops, right? There's fruit in it, right?
Yeah, there's fruit in Fruit Loops, of course. So my question is, what, as we're closing in here on an amazing hour together, what's one or two key pieces of advice that you could, I guess, wrap this up with before we get into the books that you love and your sports team and stuff, for listeners to really think hard about when it comes to, fueling their leadership lifestyle?
So Mary Lou, number one, thank you for sharing a little bit about your journey. I as you heard my journey earlier, I was a former fat kid too. And I had my own body dysmorphia issues. I didn't like the way I looked. I was bullied by the way I looked. I was made fun of. I mean, heck, I told you earlier, I had man boobs. What kind of guy wants to be walking around with man boobs and being made fun of by that? So, and the only two options I was given was testosterone replacement therapy or plastic surgery, right? And you, as you mentioned earlier, like, females are only given one option. It's diet, but they change the diet every other day. And all the information we get every other day, as you mentioned earlier, some of these, I don't want to call, I'm going to call them nuts because that's what they are. Some of these nuts out here are telling you not to eat fruits and vegetables. It's like, what? Study after study has showed you eating more fruits and vegetables will be helpful. Everything in moderation. And a key takeaway here is the 80-20 rule. So we hear about this all the time, but are you doing 80% of the week you want it to be, and then 20% being free? So what do I mean by that? When I talk about someone who's training for something, we get closer to that competition day, or for just trying to get ready for the summer, then you have to be 95-5, meaning you have to be 95 in tune with your diet and 5% liberal. If you're trying to be just coasting, you're happy where you're at and be sustainable, how do we make it fit that 80-20 rule? And if we look at a day or actually a week of breakfast, lunches, and dinners, that's 21 meals. So out of those 21 meals, can you hit 17 of them with the way you want? So that's what I work on with so many of my clients. How can we make this sustainable? 17 of those meals have to look this way. Are you doing that? Yes or no? What are the other 4? And what is that looking like? Are they getting you closer to your goal or farther away from your goal? And so many people jump on these Hail Marys of diets where they change everything over a week.
Yes.
They do it for a week, they do it for a month, but they can't sustain it. And they lose a couple pounds, but then they gain a couple more back because they keep looking for the Hail Mary versus just trying to get the first downs. And instead of someone going from this podcast and saying, like, I'm going to change all 17 of my meals out of 21, how can you change 1 to 2 this week? Then you can do 2 to 3, then 3 to 4. Slow building, right? So 1 is just making it so that it fits your lifestyle. It has nothing to do with my lifestyle. It has nothing to do with your lifestyle, Mary Lou. It's about what works for the leader listening, right? Are they someone who travels all the time? Are they someone who's at their desk all the time? What's it look like? And how do we get them fueled for success? What do they have around them? What is their support system? So I would say the main takeaway is don't listen to nuts and follow the 80-20 rule.
I love that. And you said something that reminded me of another, something that I have subscribed to, having been a chubby girl. And then I discovered, well, I remember I was in 9th grade and I was convinced that the only way that I was going to address my body size, and it wasn't like I was enormous, but I was always tall. I was very tall I grew quickly. And so I went to my mother and I said, I need to get diet pills, which is basically speed.
Yep. Yeah.
She took me to my pediatrician. He prescribed me a month worth of these diet pills. I think I took them maybe them twice. And I was so out of my head because it was speed, that I said, no way. I hated the way I felt. And I said, there has to be another way. And I discovered Jazzercise.
Yes.
I started reading the magazines of the day that were fitness oriented. And I started learning about nutrition. And I can remember I'm sure there are listeners who can relate to this when you discover a new category and you're so excited about it. And then you start looking around at everybody else. I can remember sitting at the dining room table with my family and saying, well, what's in that? I would just really, and it was my way of processing what I was learning. And, it is a journey and the fundamentals have really not ever changed. But what has changed is the number of choices that we have, the nut jobs that are out there promoting very strange approaches that you wonder, and I think all of us have fallen for at least one at some point.
I have.
Thinking, oh yeah, because you're so desperate inside to achieve whatever it is you think losing weight or getting fit is going to give you. And at the end of the day, it comes down to 2 things. You're going to be loved more and you're going to be in the cool group.
Absolutely.
That's what drives all of us. We don't want to be ostracized and we want to be loved for who we are. And it's tough in a culture that, just like you said, is changing this week it's this, now it's this, and that's done. I hate to say it, but it is done on purpose to a degree to keep us all kind of dancing on our toes. So, I remembered learning it's not about your weight so much. I mean, there is optimal weight for your frame and everything, but it's really how your clothes fit, how you feel. Is your head clear? Can you think all day? And all these things you've shared with us today, Tony, have been such great reminders. And also I'm hoping for listeners. I mean, for me, I've learned some things today. I never knew about the 5-to-1. That was really awesome. And I also loved that you brought up the whole talking about the color of our pee. I mean, I know it's kind of seriously. I mean, that's a great takeaway because everybody can do that. Everybody can look and say, oh, what is this? And again, team, I am not a medical professional. I cannot sit here and endorse one thing over another. These are tips, and you certainly want to make sure that if you're concerned about something, go find somebody who is, I don't even know how to say that. Just I have to do a disclaimer that we're not telling you this is how you should live. This is all for educational purposes only. But hopefully you're going to walk away today with some new insights about your health and what you can do when you go to the grocery store next time.
Yes.
and what you're putting on your dinner plate at night. And so for people who'd like to learn more about you, Tony, where do you hang out online? Where can they find you?
Yeah, they can just go to my website, nutritionfp.com/PYP. And I have 3 things for them. One, they have a wellness assessment, which is a 10-question assessment to really gauge where they're at in their nutrition journey, if they are peaking in their leadership of nutrition or if they have some areas of opportunity. The second thing on there I have is a 30-day habit tracker where they sign up. They get a free habit tracker and a video explaining it on how they can change their habits in 30 days in regards to their nutrition. And finally, if they feel like this was the right fit, they can obviously schedule a call with me so we can do a diet and energy audit with them to really see how we can move and get those first downs. And just as a reminder, Mary Lou, I was there too. I was the former fat kid. I wanted to know what the secret sauce was. Was it steroids? I took the hydroxy cuts. I did the low carb diets. I did the fasting. I did the Fits Your Macros, but nothing was sustainable. And I didn't know why. And that's why so many people come to me, because I got my master's in nutrition. I worked with the elite. And I saw that knowing the why is how you can make those sustainable changes. But I've been there. I had to go through it. It's about the grit and getting through it, right? I told you my options were either testosterone replacement therapy or plastic surgery, and I took neither of those, right? And I failed because I did the bodybuilding meal plan and I failed. But then things came, and so many of us fail. And I want to reduce the time of failure for anyone. And that's what hopefully some of this information can share with them.
Definitely. It's been so great. And for your, let's start with a couple of books that have been great guides for you on your leadership journey, Tony. And then we'll round out with the football.
Yeah. I would say one of the biggest ones was The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy.
Okay.
I really love that he just talks about small changes lead to big outcomes, right? And that's really what I like to focus on, because again, it's not about throwing a Hail Mary. It's about how we can get that first down. How do we make those small steps? And that will lead to the biggest changes. Because what's going to happen is we get a couple first downs and we have to punt it. We get a couple more first downs, we might get a field goal. A couple more first downs, then we have to punt it again. But it's about showing up and having the grit and being able to do the work. And I think that's really what The Compound Effect taught me. And the other one was a book my dad gave me called The Counts of Monte Cristo by Alexander Dumas, which is a very old book about a guy who gets stranded on an island. And he told that he wasn't stranded. He was actually put into jail, and he found this treasure. He decides to become the count and get vengeance on everyone around him. And I'm not about vengeance, but what I took from the story was grit. He decided to keep getting after it because he was stuck on that island for 14 years. And he decided to come back and serve justice at the end. So I think with grit, justice, and honesty, that is the way we should be leading our teams.
Yes. Lead ourselves first.
Yes.
So we can show up and do the same for our teams. Oh, fantastic. So team, the links to Tony's offer, to the books that he just mentioned will be on his show notes page at pyppodcast.com. And listen, if you have any questions or you're curious about your current state of nutrition and energy, you've heard him today. He knows what he's talking about. He's got a ton of energy. This has been so much fun. And before we say goodbye, tell us who your team is, Tony. Who or what are you watching on either Saturday and or Sunday?
On Saturday, I'm watching FIU Golden Panthers. That's just because I'm an alumni from there. And then on Sunday, I'm watching the Miami Dolphins.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, as of this recording, we are in the off season, but you know what? By the time this airs, we'll be closer to when training camps start, and then our 2023 season of football will be upon us before we know it. And I wish your teams all the best. It's fun every year. Are you a baseball fan by any chance?
Absolutely.
Who are you? Do you like? Who's down? I'm trying to think. Is it the? Are you Tampa Bay?
The Marlins.
Rays? You're the Marlins. Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, I'm loving baseball right now. It's so much fun, and I have loved this, Tony. Thank you so much for bringing your high level of energy, your exceptional wisdom on how we can be better at our jobs as leaders through good nutrition, smart choices, and keep spreading the word, man. This has been awesome.
Thank you, Mary Lou. I appreciate you.
Hey team, Mary Lou here. Who's number one in football?
year to year. Fashion trends come and go, same with musical tastes, but leadership skills, they never go out of style. In fact, these days, leadership is an essential survival skill for a world that demands more from us than ever before. To succeed these days, you need to know how to show up for yourself. You can then do the work you love with people you like the way you want. The Play Your Position Leadership Playbook helps you do this, and it's free. Go to pyppodcast.com to download your copy today. If being more successful this year, next year, in the 21st century is on your to-do list, of the Play Your Position Leadership Playbook now. pyppodcast.com. It's at the top of the page. You can't miss it. That's pyppodcast.com, and start being more of the leader you are meant to be today. This podcast was produced by Daniel Romeros. Show notes for this episode can be found over at pyppodcast.com. I'm Mary Lou Kaiser. Thanks for listening.
Here at the Play Your Position podcast, we believe that the road to self-mastery and a life well lived starts with answering the call to leadership. That's when the fun really begins. Send this episode to any friends who might need to hear the inspiration and ideas you heard today. And feel free to rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform.